Hi, everyone, and welcome to our conversation today for the IAB Summit. Today, we're going to be talking about what it means to be a values-driven brand in 2021 and beyond, and how we take that beyond box checking. So I'm joined by three founders that we've invested in at BBG Ventures: Chloe Songer, the founder of Thousand Fell; Jamie Lee, the founder of Flocks; and Freddie Harrel, who's actually joining us from London, the founder of RadSwan. So before we kick it off, I wanted to frame up a little bit what we mean by values-aligned consumers. And at BBG Ventures, we've been spending a lot of time thinking about what this new consumer looks like. Historically, every new generation drives profound change through their value sets, through the platforms they adopt and the brands they embrace. Each generation is growing more diverse over time, and so these changes are becoming progressively more profound. In 1969, baby boomers, who were then 7 to 22, were 81% white. Fast forwarding 40 years, and that majority is quickly shrinking. So Gen Z in 2019 was 53% white at ages 7 to 22. But the recent census data from 2020 shows that for the first time, that script is flipping. So Americans under 18 years old are now 53% non-white. So with this more diverse population of emerging consumers and the needs of historically underrepresented and underserved populations growing more pronounced, there's this huge opportunity for brands, we think, to gain consumer loyalty. We ran a survey across about 1,000 customers over America to better understand the changing perspective of these new consumers. And in particular, wanted to better understand, given this diversity for Gen Z, how they're aligning their preferences for shopping against their values. And we found some really interesting things. So 60% or more of Gen Z that they said that they were shopping more, all or most of the time, I should say, at brands aligned with their values across the environment, across social issues, people of color-owned businesses, and local businesses. And then 40% of Gen Z said they intend to spend more at these brands over the next 12 months. They also talked a lot about how they think about these environmental issues specifically and how they think about brands. So when it came to willingness to reduce their impact on the climate, they were the most likely to eat sustainable foods, to purchase secondhand clothing. And we observed a number of other sort of exciting things in this data. I'm not going to tell you the whole survey today, but I think suffice to say, there's a huge opportunity for brands to speak very directly to this generation with transparency and authenticity. So in that vein, I'm really excited to have these wonderful founders take you through how they're doing that through their brands. But I will also note that there were more themes in this survey emerging, particularly from the pandemic, about this generation's focus on health as a number one priority, saving as a number one priority, and a desire to be in real life, the desire to switch jobs and aim for flexibility. So I think it's fair to say that this generation is going to push us forward in ways we might not have imagined even 3 years ago. So I want to hand it over to the panelists, maybe just to introduce themselves with a kind of one line on what it is your company does. And I'll start with Chloe.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here. I'm Chloe Songer, the founder of Thousand Fell, and we're building circular systems for the next generation. And we started with a full circle, fully recyclable sneaker.
Thanks, Chloe. How about you, Jamie?
Hi, my name is Jamie Lee. Thank you so much for having me. I'm the founder of Flocks, and we're building a social app for Gen Z to connect in groups. And we're on a mission to bring back authentic connection.
And Freddie.
Hi, I'm Freddie, the founder of RadSwan. We are a conscious beauty brand built for and by the global African diaspora.
Well, I think it's probably fairly clear who some of your target consumers are, maybe what their values are, but I'd love to hear it in your own words. How do you think about your target consumer? And what are the the couple of core values, even sort of below that original set that I described, that you think are most important to your consumers? And maybe we'll go back around the other way, and Freddie, you can talk about the woman that you're serving.
Mm-hmm. So the woman that we are serving, she's a millennial. She's between late 20s to like 25 to 35. She's a Black woman. She's in America. She's in Europe as well. She really has this commitment to her self-exploration journey. So her means of self-expression, and also what are she's really like looking for like-minded brands as well, to really like change the way that she shops around beauty, anything related to really like her self-expression. And she's really looking for a brand that is a lot more transparent and vocal about its ethos. That's kind of how I would sum it up.
Jamie, you're almost the odd woman out on this panel because you're not building a consumer goods brand, but tell us about who Phlox is going after and what matters to them.
Yeah, so Phlox, our target user are people from the age of 17 to 25, which typically consists of college students and recent postgrads. So we're really trying to hit those people who are in this, very critical point in time in their lives where they're looking to meet new people. Either they just got to school and they're really trying to branch out and expand their social circle, or they're now in this new city and they maybe know one person who might be their roommate. And I guess I could speak to my experience as well, speaking as a user myself as a 22-year-old. Basically, Phlox was born out of my realization that I grew up on Instagram, and as consumers of that platform, my friends and I really realized that we were focusing entirely on how we were projecting an image of ourselves online. And over the years, we've just become less and less authentic. So that's obviously taken a huge toll on our mental health. And I would say that, what our users are really looking for is a way to actually connect with people authentically. And our thesis is behind the idea that that can be done in groups of friends, because you're your most authentic version of yourself around your friends. So I would definitely sum it up as authenticity, spontaneity, and comfort as what our users really value.
Great. Chloe.
Yeah, our customer is similar, kind of a mix between Jamie and Freddie's, but we've been hyper focused on younger millennials and older Gen Z. So our biggest audience right now is 25 to 29, Halo's up to 34, and Halo's down to about 15. We've actually recently been selling out of the lower end of the size curve faster. So it's as our age range is shifting lower, and so we will need to start dropping into lower sizes. But with our first product is footwear. We started really focused on digging into what that core consumer base cared about. And we found that sustainability is one of the top 5 causes, like across the board. 80% of millennials and Gen Z included it as one of the top 5 things that they cared about, that they were focused on. But there's this whole new idea about intersectionality, and it might not be to them the number one thing on their heart day to day, but it doesn't mean that they're not willing to make changes or in their day-to-day life around sustainability, but they might not know where to start. And we launched, we had that knowledge, and then we went into the pandemic and everything completely changed. And something that was interesting to us as a brand that basically launched into the pandemic, our official launch day was meant to be April 2020, was just the role of individual action last year and what community looks like around brands. And so I think we had all these offline plans that we completely switched to digital, and we ended up having events that were, I think the biggest event we've had yet is a 350 person online event, but we've had multiple events plus 100, plus 150 people just around what can I do? What is the intersection of racism and sustainability, or social justice and sustainability? And, how do I think about the future of fashion, and what can I do as a consumer with supply chain? And just starting to really understand how linked the world is. And even now, actually, we have a community now around the brand called Friend of the Future. And finally, the press focusing on what's going on with supply chain and how linked global supply chain is. This younger consumer is interested. And so I would say, a couple of the things they really care about, at least the core crew around the brand, is transparency, conversation and connection. They are hyper aware when they're being marketed to. And, it might fly in the face of like the rise of Shein and Boohoo right now. But what we've seen is an actual audience that does want to have a real conversation and not just a marketing conversation. And then they want to have an understanding of what real sustainability is. So we've been leaning into those areas.
Well, there's so much great stuff there that I want to dig into. Let me start with this comment you made, which is this consumer is hyper aware when they're being marketed to. And I think, Jamie, we've discussed this, that your generation and the users of Vlogs, I mean, you can sniff out inauthenticity from a mile away. And so when you think about how you and your friends are interacting with brands, what are some of those red flags?
Definitely. I actually, Chloe, when you said that really resonated with me, because Gen Z, given that, I think it's important to remember, like, we actually grew up on the internet, and as a result, like, we can see this from a mile away when we are being marketed to. And I think that's why actually TikTok as just a phenomena is really interesting to me, because brands can't get by on TikTok if they are clearly presenting an ad. Like, you actually have to be authentic online for that, on TikTok, for that to go anywhere. And I think thinking about Gen Z when it comes to authenticity for big businesses, I think it's kind of a political thing. Like, we really hold, thinking about large businesses versus small businesses, we tend to definitely want to support small businesses. And I think it all boils down to how we view capitalism in a weird way. I think we see this capitalist system and the people who are suffering. And as a result, we realize that these large corporations have immense privilege. And with that privilege comes a huge responsibility. And so when we don't see that responsibility being held up, we will immediately cancel that company, because we see the privilege that they have and the responsibility and accountability that they need to take thereafter. So I was actually thinking about just, the Black Lives Matter movement last year as a prime example of this, because I remember my friends and I could easily see when brands would post on Instagram their statements, and how there were some brands that we really knew were being genuine with their words and that they meant it. However, others were just, literally hopping on the bandwagon because that was something they had to in order to, go along with the flow of what other brands were doing. And so I would say, like, being very genuine and consistent with your brand values are so important, because I think Gen Z, more than any other generation, really sees brands both that we wear on our body or use on our phones to speak to our individual identities.
Yeah. And I think couple of things to dive into there with Freddie. I mean, certainly last year we saw this, these pledges from hundreds of brands signing up to the 15% pledge. And some of those brands got it right and some of them got it wrong. And I think the extension of that question there is, and this is one of the conversations that I think we've been having, Freddie, since we met, is that Black women are really the drivers of cultural trends. And for so long, though, they've been behind the scenes and overlooked. Behind the scenes is probably a very polite way of putting it. But more and more, we're seeing startups built by Black women for Black women. I think in many ways, identity has become the new mainstream, and rightly so. How do you think a brand today can show up authentically for Black women? How is RadSwan doing it? I think there are a myriad of examples. I can't wait for you to share. And where are larger brands failing in that?
Mm-hmm. I really think, there was a long time where we were all asking for more representation, and it's very, it's definitely really important. And I like to think that now we've gone past the need for representation, and that what people really want, what they need, is relatability. So more than just seeing someone who looks like you want also to see someone who looks like you and has shared struggles with you, who thinks like you, who it's like it has to be deeper than that. It's really at the individual level now that you're really going to connect with the brand. I think we look at brands now with more of a holistic approach. It's more like, okay, do we sit together? Do we not sit together? And this is where I feel some brands are still failing and catching up. I can only speak from my experience as a Black woman, but I think, even the way that Black women, like we are culturally, the way that we, like hair is really what connects us. It's not necessarily like a hobby, but what brings us together. And I think we have really this strong capacity at creating our own local world, our local circles, just from the topic of hair. And so the way that we really approach brands now even more is really how we approach the way that our social groups are, which is in a much more holistic capacity. Like, do we really align on more than just like the final product? And that's really important. I think when you look at the Black women audience, especially like in beauty, you can ask anyone, everyone knows there's a lot of money to be made. Black women spend so much money. So it's almost like indecent, I think, for a business to really leave it at just that like, marketing a product. Because when you really hone in community, culture, shared struggles, shared problems, shared ethos, shared values, this is when you're really going to resonate with the audience. So really like focusing on the individual, but it's a lot more of an effort. It's a lot more investment in content. It requires for you to be a lot more intentional. And sometimes, like corporate brands, because of their size, because of their makeup as well, they really struggle to catch up with that. Like Jamie was saying, authenticity is very important. That's not something that you can really manufacture.
Yeah, and you said something great there about relatability. And I think that ties back to what you were describing about TikTok, Jamie. And I think anything that's shareable on social media, which is where we consume or get exposed to brands today, has at its core relatability. So anything that goes viral, you look at that and you say, wow, I see myself in that, or there's some emotion there, whether it's sad or funny, that pulls me in and compels me to align myself with that brand, say, this is my group of people. And I think in many ways you're all doing just, I think, a really fantastic job of that. I'll let the audience go and look you all up on social media, on Instagram and TikTok. But why don't we skip quickly to this idea then? I think, Chloe, you did a great job of setting up sort of the values that your consumer is looking for when it comes to sort of the sub values under sustainability, but maybe jump to how values alignment can also make money for brands, and talk a little bit about the buying behavior you're seeing with this circular economy model with Thousand Fell.
Yeah, totally. So I think, full stop, I'll kind of give the stats and they can talk about, how or why we think this has happened. But our hypothesis was that by investing in circularity, investing in recycling, and you're investing in a relationship with a consumer post the point of purchase. The traditional retail model means that you engage with a person, you market to them, they have to see it 7 to 10 times before they buy. You've done all the work, building the social engagement up front, you sell the product, and then you kind of wipe your hands clean. And then next conversation you have with that person is upselling them a second product or a third product. You might send a product review email, but outside of that, you're not talking about that old product. And you kind of wiped your hands clean, even though it has your logo on it. And so with circularity and with recycling, what we decided was that our hypothesis was that would give brands an opportunity to continue to engage with the customer post point of purchase in an authentic way that was about the use or the life cycle and the end of life of that product rather than upselling. And so, I think there's a lot more that we can do and that we are building on the life cycle side, but already what we've seen is that consumers that are recycling have a 70% higher net revenue value. So they're spending 70% more. They're repeating more than 60% more often. And they're buying, I think, 50+% more units per transaction. So just this idea that they're, deeply invested in the brand, they're engaging with the brand, they're participating in the recycling system. We're very early in our backend beta system where they'll be eventually able to track and trace and see when and how their product is recycled. It creates an entirely new, transparent, communication channel between a brand and a consumer past the point of purchase that actually builds that longer and deeper relationship that people are looking for now. And so up until this point, this idea of, should we take back product? Should we recycle it? What do we do with product when we're done with it? What do we do with returns product? It's always been, the question for brands has been, can you put 10 to 15% OpEx into like this ESG social good, looked at like a tax? But the way we want to flip it with TF is by investing in recycling, can you actually generate more loyal customers and incremental top line revenue? And can we then, by making this, a loyalty and revenue driver, can we get other brands to eventually recycle? And so we're really excited to see that right now with Thousand Fell. And I think it goes back to a lot of what you were saying, Freddie, and even what you said, Jamie. It's people don't want to buy, they don't want to be marketed to, they don't want to buy a one-off product, maybe unless it's for a Halloween costume that they've been planning to throw away, which I have other thoughts about. But they want to engage. I loved what you said, Freddie, with the individual, and they want to learn more deeply. And so I think this idea of building systems within brand where you have more authentic communication other than upsell is really interesting and unique.
Yeah. And part of that, I think, authentic communication can be really pulled together by the communities. A lot of you guys are building, and many new brands are building. And I think maybe Freddie, just briefly talk about how you used community and product development, this co-collaboration, and then maybe Jamie or Chloe can talk about it very quickly in the context of customer acquisition, particularly in the face of iOS 14. But I'll start with Freddie.
Yeah, of course. So, in our particular context, the fact that we serve Black women specifically, and as you know, Nisha, there's only a few Black women who get backed, to start those businesses. And when it comes to the Black hair market, there's even less Black-owned brands. So it means that the most of the brands serving us are built without our input, and that's kind of like how RadSwan started almost accidentally. That was because I was just going to really build with just realizing that with people we had similar things in common that we wanted from a product. That's how the brand was born, and the way that we built it was really important that whatever we were going to bring out was going to be decided at a community level, because finally someone had the opportunity to really create the solution to our shared problem. So it's important that we address it together, because at the end of the day, we're trying to serve people, so we might as well build with them.
Yeah, and that's how they become your strongest evangelists. So I don't know if Chloe or Jamie, you want to jump in and talk a little bit about how your community building is driving users or customer acquisition.
Do you want to go, Jamie?
Sure, I can take it. I can talk about our Flocks Friday events. So I guess the story of our acquisition, I actually started on TikTok. I kind of accidentally went viral when I was just sitting in my bedroom at home. My parents were like, why are you talking to yourself? No, but I think it was interesting to me because I'd never posted on TikTok before. I think I had 0 followers, and we ended up getting a wait list of 25,000 from just posting a few videos, sort of about my own experience online as a 22-year-old woman on dating apps, and really being excited about this group model. And it was interesting to see how people resonated with the concept. And pretty much what we've been doing over the past month and a half is I've actually been really trying to build this evangelist in-person experience network and community in New York City, which is where we're in beta right now. And so I've been having just our first users over at my apartment. It's 10 square feet in the East Village. And it's been great because what we've been seeing is that, when users feel special and personal connection to the brand, they want to bring in their other friends. So Flocks will come to my apartment, and the next weekend they'll come back and they'll bring new Flocks with them.
Love that. Well, I think we have to wrap up pretty shortly. So thanks to all of you for joining us. And I wanted to call out, I think, some of the words that really popped here for me that I think brands should take away. But Authenticity came up so many times, transparency, spontaneity, relatability, and community. And I think if you're a brand or working at a brand and you're listening to this today, you know, one of your takeaways should really be, do I have Gen Z and young millennials on my team who can actually help me craft that? So thanks to everyone for joining us today, and we'll look forward to your questions via social media.